Mount Everest is 8,848 meters above sea level. It's the highest mountain on Earth. Mount Everest is located in the Mahalangpur section of the Himalayan mountains. The summit crosses the border between Tibet and Nepal. Mount Everest is home to many unsolved mysteries. Intriguing. Today we're going to tell you about 15 of the most mysterious things that happened on Mount Everest. It'll leave you speechless. First article. Maurice Wilson, 1758–1805, British naval hero. Over the years Mount Everest has attracted many fanatics, eccentrics and colorful characters, but none so peculiar as the Englishman Morrison's. 1933. Wilson has a plan. He's going to fly to the United States of America on Mount Everest. Ditch. And then I climbed up to Curry's Peak alone. He trained in England, learning to fly gypsy format airplanes on the go. Before the winter comes. He's just a kid. He flew to Mount Everest. Just, ing, and nothing else. He passed the machine, preparing for the time and expectation of the return to the summit. He believes it's enough to get him to the top. Wilson hopes to use Everest climb as platform, publicizing his beliefs, when radicalization is combined with faith in God, can solve the world's problems. Despite lack of mountaineering or driving experience, he still managed to fly from England to India. Sneaking into Tibet, climbed a 6,920-meter mountain. Nevertheless, Wilson doesn't survive the takedown attempt. A British expedition found his body the following year. His last entry in his diary was on May 30th. His body was found, allegedly wearing women's underwear. Although this claim has never been substantiated. 1960. A Chinese team found a high-heeled woman's shoe near where Wilson was killed. Come to realize, Wilson has dead. Wilson works in a women's clothing store in New Zealand. Then he developed Everson's mania, eventually leading to death. (2003). 2003. Thomas No Tomsino suggests Wilson may have reached the summit of Mt Everson, and was killed on the way down. But as to whether an inexperienced amateur like Wilson could climb the mountain without help, a lot of people are skeptical. Wilson made it to the top. And the force that compelled him to climb Everest remains a mystery. The second snowman. The Yeti was once known as the snowy augmentable man. It's a mysterious biped. Said to live in the mountains of Asia, he sometimes leaves tracks in the snow. But it's also said that he lived a little below the Himalayan snow line. Despite dozens of expeditions in the remote mountains of Russia, China and Nepal. But the existence of the Yeti remains unconfirmed. It is said that snowmen are muscular, covered with gray or reddish-brown skin, cats weighing between 90 and 180 kilograms. Compared to the size of the North American, it's relatively low, average about 1.8 centimeters, but this is the most common form of reporting. Snowmen come in many forms. Many of the first recorded sightings of Yetis came from the Mount Everest area. Local Nepalese and Tibetan tribal folklore tells the story of the Yeti. The Yeti is a very popular and widely known animal in the region. It is said that the snowman lives in the middle of the mountain. In the middle of the mountain. Since modern times, a number of sightings, footprints and even DNA evidence go a long way to confirming the claims of storytellers in the area. Famous examples include the discovery of giant footprints 6,000 meters away from Eric Shipton's Everest expedition in 1951, and the discovery of Yeti hair at Kundong Monastery on the south side of Mount Everest. Arguably, even more compelling are the findings of Joshua Gates, Zatri, Giatez, and his Truth Destination team in 2009. Gates' hair sample from a string of footprints 33 centimeters long and 25 centimeters wide. After forensic analytical style testing, it was concluded that the sample contained a DNA sequence that was completely unknown until then. Same with the Great and Small and the Lagunitas monster. There is also a distinct lack of concrete evidence for the existence of Yetis, although some evidence has emerged over the years. Despite decades of searching for the Yeti. But the lack of concrete evidence didn't keep the true believers alive. The fact that these mysterious creatures have not been found does not prove they don't exist. Rather, it's a testament to how rare they are. At the present time, the existence of the Yeti remains a mystery in the snowy reaches of Mount Everest. Mount Everest is haunted by paranormal phenomena, ghosts and other unexplained events. Documenting the fact that Sherpa Tenpa Dorje was and is a partial Ber Dor who rose to fame in the mountaineering world for two reasons. Firstly, he set a speed record for climbing Mount Everest in 8 hours and 10 minutes on May 21, 2004. The second is 3 days later, on May 24. As he approached Kumi Peak from the South Kernel, a group of dead hikers were found many days ago. Their bodies are frozen in the snow. Abrupt. He claims to be surrounded by something supernatural. In his own words, "When I stopped on a rocky hill, I saw some dark shadowy ghosts coming towards me. They took me by the hand and asked me for food. I think they're the ghosts of a lot of hikers. They were killed unbeknownst to them while climbing Mt Everest. The remains of many of the victims are still on the mountain. A climber killed in an accidental fall is still hanging on the rope. Many Sherpas believe the ghost of Mount Everest will not calm down or leave the mountain. Too many corpses trapped at 8,000 meters above sea level. And every year, more bodies are added to the mix. Plus the difficulty of recovering the body. That's why there can't be no ghosts on Everest so soon. Fourth place, Mallory and Owen. When Sir Edmund Hillary and Dandenong Norgay became the first people to reach the summit of Mount Everest's Koh Phangan in 1953, many saw through binoculars the victory of George Mallory and his companion Sandy Irving. Little black dots of eyes affixed to the summit of Mount Everest's majestic northeast peak. It's only 200 to 300 meters to Kumi Peak. Unfortunately, they never came back, leading to nearly a century of speculation as to whether they were indeed the first people to reach the top of the world. 1924. Mountaineer George Mallory said, "Molly has participated in 2 expeditions to Mount Everest." 1921. He followed the first British-accredited expedition to the Himalayas, organized by the Everest Committee and led by Charles Howard Berry Charlotte Howard Bailey. This expedition mapped the area around Mount Everest in detail for the first time. There are 2 experienced climbers on this team. Alexander Kellis, Arzace and Harold Ray Bernery, but Kellis died of a heart attack on a long walk. Rayburn is sick, too. Forced retirement. Mallory is the expedition's alpine leader by default. In this capacity he explored potential routes to Curry's Peak, and climbing with the Sherpa team. He may have been the first European to see the north face of Sultan's Peak. There his team blazed a trail across the Red Book Glacier to the north side of the base. In previous attempts, Mallory instinctively used an oxygen tank to help breathe air, but he thinks it's somehow unethical. On the 3rd expedition, Mallory concludes, "Without this artificial help, Everest will never be climbed." After many attempts to reach the summit, Mallory motions for final try with Owen, because Owen's so good with oxygen tanks. And strong as an ox. Accompanied by 5 weight-bearers, Mallory and Owen move through the camp. The 2 were led by Odell, with Odell as his guide. Odell got caught in a blizzard while patrolling the mountains. When the snow starts to fall, he left. And start calling those people. Hopefully, it'll guide them to where they are. But he had to stay put. Until the storm dies down. The morrow. He returned with 2 loaders, and spent the night there. And then move on alone. Until Camp 6. There's no change there. A few hours later. He still hasn't found any sign of his missing companion. So I organized my sleeping bag into a T-shape. Signal the following WS, says there's no sign of them. 1999. When Conrad Anker's expedition found Mallory's body. Frozen remains of Britain reveal no further clues. What's even more disappointing is that they haven't found a signal to end the argument once and for all. Nevertheless, for those who believe Mallory and Owen were the first to reach the summit of Everest, the greatest evidence in favor of his claim lies in the fact that when Anker's team discovered what Mallory didn't have. Mallory had told his wife, Ruth, and his team of mountaineers, when he reached the top of the mountain, he'll have a picture of his wife in his guts. When the body was found, the photo's gone. Although this is not definitive proof, but Mallory and Owen could be the first to reach Everest. Fifth third person, British explorer Frank Smith Finnegan Comrie nearly became the first person to reach the summit of Mount Everest in 1933. Due to strong winds, snow, ice and low oxygen levels in the mountains, its entire trekking and climbing party returned before reaching the summit of the mountain. Smith moves on. But we never made it to the top. It's about 300 meters less. Afterwards. In his diary, Smith details what is known among scientists as the third man factor. He wrote. While climbing, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a mint cake. Break it in half. And then climb alone. This feeling of having a second person with him eliminated all the loneliness he might have felt. Equal. 2 British climbers, Doug Heston do hit 10 and Doug Scottsdale AR, after reaching Everest late in September 1975, forced to spend the night in a dead zone. They don't know if they'll survive the night. So into the snow cave, spent the night there. There's not enough air for everyone. They're in grave danger. Stomach rumbling with hunger, hardly any blankets to keep warm. Then something happened that no one can explain. Both climbers claim to have felt a third person with them on the snow. Not only did this man provide critical body heat, and tips for many other Everest climbers, and what about the Peter Hillarys, Lincoln Hall and Reinhold Mays? Number 6 Alastair Steckel at STK. Alastair is often referred to as the Swiss machine at Rees-Te. April 2017. He died while training for the historic attempt to reach the West Ridge and Lhotse peaks of Mount Everest in one day. Anyone familiar with Sturck recognizes, he's one of the greatest climbers in the world of mountaineering. Thus his great ideas were not considered too big or too risky. Steck has set speed records on the north slope of Mount Ida and the south slope of Mount Annapurna. He was twice awarded the equivalent of the Nobel Prize in Mountaineering, the Soloran Gold Medal, for his first ascent of Fujitambo Boscan and his fast solo ascent of Annapurna. Steck is not only fast, and on the most treacherous lines with dexterity, grace, and ease, it made him one of the most accomplished mountaineers of his time. In that case, what led to the death of this mountaineering powerhouse? Striker's climb took place in the western Sequimi Weston Scummy. This is a section of the Khumbu tourist route to Everest Kurikumi. He's climbed it before. For a climber like Striker, this climb was supposed to be a walk in the park. In fact, it was just a training session for his planned Zhu Feng, Luo Zi Kuru Feng. His climbing partner, Dongi Sherpa Celestial Ship, later revealed the climbers all over the world were shocked and incredulous at the news of Stek's death. Witness his talent as an athlete and the mystery of Mount Everest. Did it fall? It's the snow melting. Or did the ice give up? It was the altitude that finally took him. How the world's best climber lost his balance and fell more than 300 meters before his death, no one can be sure. Sturk climbed it alone. It's a habit of his. Because his climbing partner couldn't keep up with him. And the closest witnesses to his fall were 1.5 kilometers away. What happened remains a mystery. But the loss of such an outstanding star is one of the most unfortunate events to have happened to Mount Everest. 7th place, 1952 Russian expedition climbs ancestral peak 1952. Before the famous Hillary and Denton summit, a Russian expedition is said to be attempting to climb Mount Everest from the northern route in Tibet. Sources at the time said, this optimistic group plans to erect statues of Lenin and Stalin on Kumi Peak. The expedition set up its last camp at about 8,000 meters above sea level, preparing for the Kumasong climb. Despite the fact that Yevgeny Jipshite was constipated and changed the movie. And in a story published in Alpine magazine later that year, says 35 climbers set out to try northeast Cresta route, but the Russians have always believed that the 1952 expedition didn't happen. The Soviet Union denied the attempt. Aside from the sporadic reports in the newspapers, no further records. April 21, 1952. The Sydney Morning Herald also speculated on the mountaineer's perspective. Despite numerous attempts, but there's still no sign of the crew's remains or the leader's name. Number 8, through May 22, 2017, 4 bodies were found in a tent at Camp 4. The news reached the Everest base. The unfortunate climbers were discovered by a team sent to rescue the remains of a Slovakian climber on Kume Peak 3 days ago. This Lovat climber died of altitude sickness. When it was later discovered that none of the mountaineering agencies on the mountain were missing or not counting climbers, there's confusion over who might be the 4 climbers. While sources around the world have reported the tragedy, but Nepal tourism does not disclose, they think the bodies belong to climbers from the previous year's expedition. When it was discovered that none of these expeditions had reported unaccounted for climbers, things are getting more complicated. This case is still pending. He's just one of the countless mysteries that take place on the highest, most mysterious mountain on Earth. Number 9, north of Mount Everest. Rainbow Valley is a small valley not far from Kumi Peak. The Rainbow Valley is where the climbers who tried and failed to reach the summit of Mt Everest, Mt Kumi, are buried. Everest's Rainbow Valley is named after the colorful coats left by tourists and locals at the graveyard. Though his name is brilliant and cheerful. But it's one of the scariest places on Everest. Thousands of climbers try to reach the summit every year. But they all failed. Not many people admit defeat and return to camp. There's still a bunch of people who haven't come back from the mountains. This has become their permanent home. It's pathetic. Because his body was left in the snow, frozen beyond decay by the cold temperatures. The more people die, the more bodies that pile up, causes areas like Everest Rainbow to become popular areas. A bizarre flying object soars over Mount Everest. A terrifying lens analyzes a 2 billion pixel photo of a mountain peak. Spotted a black shape over the Himalayas. Many say it's an alien ship. The Sky Observer said, due to his height and the fact that it causes silhouettes, he can't be a drone. After mountaineer and filmmaker David Brashear's living 80 people took an impressive photo of a mountain consisting of 2 billion pixels. The object was noted by observers. This photo is one of 7 photos of myself. These photos were put together. It creates an ultra-high-definition mosaic photo. This full-length photo captures the world's tallest peak in stunning detail. From base camp, where 500 climbers prepare to climb, to the sky that towers above. This piece was created in 2012. But he seems to have captured more than just this mountain. The UIO Observer Today group that analyzed this photo said, around the location where the photo was taken, there are rumors of a secret underground base in Area 51. Almost inaccessible areas in Ladakh on the India-China border. There's also a lot of speculation about such bases. Unclassified documents from last year say, since 1968, a total of 7 unidentified flying object sightings occurred in the area. This is certainly exciting for those who are interested, and rumors of alien and UFO sightings. Because it's said to be an 11th Sherpa attack. Mt Komolungma or Komolengma, Tibetan. Most climbers hope to find the unexpected. I even believe you can see the sky from the mountains. In England, mountaineer John Griffith Battle Guffey and his 2 companions found a group of angry Sherpas. Considering insecurity, they were forced off Everest. As the entrance to the Everest region, John Griffiths told the Guardian Panther that because of the discussion of the problem at the top of the mountain, the moment a group of up to 100 Sherpas confronted them. He said, "It's obvious. They won't talk and negotiate. They reached the top of the hill above our tent. Put the skates on your face. Go down to the mountain and pick up some rocks." Griffith said. Without the bravery of these 2 climbers, she and his 2 partners were eliminated long ago in this event. She praised American climbers Melissa Arnott and Ness Erna. She's the only woman to have climbed Everest 4 times. She warned them of an impending attack. The attack occurred because Griffith and her companions had just had a heated discussion with the Sherpa. They thought it was just a verbal discussion. I didn't realize the Sherpas had come back with an army. According to Griffiths, there's 50 minutes. Everyone thinks they're gonna get stoned. He went on to say, he doesn't understand what's happening. One of the climbers, Simone, was injured. But he survived. Griffith and his companions escaped from the summit, because their safety is at stake. If they stay there for a long time, things could get ugly. 12th place. Goral Himalayan Goral pot meat or grey Goral turtle pot meat is a Himalayan life cattle, distributed near the forests around empty Everest. Himalayan Gorals 95–135 cm in length, weight 35–42 kg, dorsal hair grey or brown, tail brown, light-colored spots on the head, a dark stripe down the 3-point spine. If you look closely at the Himalayan Golars, Just realize it looks like a mix of tail lamb and dunlin. It's one of the only animals in the area. The Himalayan Goral passerine wing forms plots consisting of 4 to 12 individuals. Can be well camouflaged in the environment. This makes it very difficult to observe. It's one of the only species found on Mount Everest. Item 13 Marine fossils. Though Mount Everest is impressive, but millions of years ago, large tracts of land separated from Africa, dragged by plate trenching across what is now the Indian Ocean, formed the Himalayas near Asia. This land is starting to move the land forward. It creates a huge shallow sea full of marine life. Limestone was formed from the fossilized plants and animals that lived in this shallow sea. Eventually, when this piece of when continuing northward and colliding with Asia, the Himalayas formed it drained the ocean and raised the altitude. The Indian subcontinent refers to this landmass. In the process of moving north, the land is still rising. 1915. Limestone and marine fossils have been found at the top of these mountains. This is one of the main arguments in favor of the plate tectonics doctrine, that large chunks of the Earth's crust are sliding over rocks melted from the Earth's crust. This image was acquired on January 5, 2002 by the Enhanced Static Imager (ESI) sensor of Deep Earth Remote Sensing Satellite, DORIS-7. This is a natural color image. However, due to the inclusion of some infrared wavelengths near the green channel, observations have highlighted vegetation. The image was also improved by utilizing the sensor's panchromatic waveband. As for the scientific evidence of marine fossils, some have attributed this discovery to the biblical growth of shrubs and grasses in Genesis 6:9's major big sweet potato 14. Shrubs and grasses are emerging around Mount Everest and throughout the Himalayas. And the Himalayas are one of the hottest regions on Earth. It's got scientists worried about the future of this place. Scientists have used satellite data to determine the increase in vegetation in off-the-beaten-path self-contained areas. This is the highest area where plants are allowed to grow. Ecosystems composed of grasslands and dwarf shrubs. Seasonal snowpack is known for this ecosystem, but it can play a vital role in the hydrological coverage of the area. It covers an area 5 to 15 times larger than the area of permanent glaciers and snow cover in the region. NASA researchers from the University of Bassett examined images from 1993 to 2018 provided by the LASA satellite by measured the sea expansion of vegetation cover in 4 altitude ranges up to 4,150 m to 6,000 m. Since the beginning of the century, Himalayan glaciers melting at double the rate. Over the past 40 years, Himalayan glaciers have lost more than a quarter of their total ice volume. Study shows that their ecosystems are highly vulnerable to climate-induced changes. This is one of the worrying situations. There are many risks associated with the 15th person to survive the most frightening day on Everest and give feedback again. When a 7.8 magnitude earthquake hit the Himalayas in 2015, the mountaineer and Ringling geologist, who was praised by critic Jim Davidson June Berry son, is at Camp 1 on Mount. He wiped out 18 men on the mountain. Nearly 9,000 people eliminated in Nepal and 2 neighboring countries. This day marks the highest death toll in the history of Mount Everest. Top. 11 days later, Davidson rescued in helicopter. Others were rescued at the time. Davidson was not only spared. He also decided to return to Everest 2 years later. And in the summer of 2016 topped After seeing a few of our friends climb to the top, Davidson feels he's lost the party. He decided that he must try Everest again the following year. He's sitting with Gloria. The announcement was made to the children, to reduce the risk of climbing Everest a second time. Davidson, then in his 50s, trained an average of 4 hours a day. Sometimes up to 12 hours of morning and evening training. So that there is still time for the family. For the past many years, to spend more time training and with his family. He avoids other hobbies. Davidson achieved his long-term goal, and sent a message to his wife from the top of Mount Everest. I'm on top of the world. These are the 15 most mysterious things that happened on Mount Everest. If you like this video, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. To follow new videos. Take care of your friends.